while you're finishing your muffin, I'd love to read you a poem by Thomas McGrath that I consider to be a very masterful poem. And then we'll discuss a few idiosyncrasies about the poem that make it masterful to me. Would that be okay?
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay. Have you ever heard of Thomas McGrath?
I haven't.
Well, the first thing that you should know is that he wrote these poems between 1938 and 1988. So this is actually a letter. It's a letter poem. And a letter poem, when the reader knows that it is a letter poem, by the very fact that it's in print, it has given them permission to read it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's so different than a you poem, which when you say you have always, or you have never been there, or the reader says, no, not me. How could you say that about me? It's not my fault. So this being a letter poem gives the reader permission. And it's called Offering. Father, you must have been, like now, on a tiny raft while the big ship went down. You had taken our mother aboard while the decks were still awash, then for a little time. It must have seemed almost like heaven, though you've never said that in words, nor has she. But I saw it in both your eyes when you thought we were not watching. Heaven then, even on the dark and shoreless waters, other rafts went down. Around you cries went up, agonies, sharks clouding and clotting in the sea. Heaven. Then our mother began presenting us to you. One every couple of years was conjured out of the gypsy tint of her black skirts. And you fed us, fishing all night in the hungry waters, giving your clothing to warm us, and you, naked, shivering in the cold, enduring. Why didn't you drown us like a litter of sick cats? But didn't. You gave your freedom for our mother's fulfillment, and you gave us all the lost honey of a young man's years, steering through the vicious seas of those bitter times. Ah, dearest Father, dear helmsman. So because of McGrath's age, we know that he's talking about the Great Depression. Mm-hmm. But notice how this poem then becomes timeless, because he doesn't say the Great Depression. And heavens knows, this could be about 9/11. This could be, the hard times could be about a war, World War II, or it could be any time. Mm-hmm. So having a poem that's timeless is wonderful if we want it read by our great-great-grandchildren 100 years from now. The other thing that he does in here is I want you to notice how he varies the language in here and the energy of the poem so that it keeps the reader engaged. It actually forces them down to the very next line. You can't stop reading in the middle of this poem because your eye is just drawn to the next line and the next line. And the way he does that is by varying the energy. So he starts off in what I call straight talk. He's just talking, just writing a letter to his father. You must have taken our mother aboard while the decks were still awash. Then for a little time it must have seemed almost like heaven. Just as if he was talking to his father. But then he repeats the word heaven then. So he breaks up that energy. He says, we were watching heaven then, even on the dark and shoreless waters. So now immediately he goes into what we call the deep voice, which is the rich, descriptive language that isn't that straight talk. Even on the dark and shoreless waters. You have never called up a friend and said, we were out on the dark and shoreless waters.
Right.
So the energy is varied there, and that's so important in a poem. And then he goes down and he says, then our mother began presenting us to you. Pretty straight talk. One every couple of years was conjured out of the gypsy tint of her black skirts. So now we're talking about an energy that's called surreal, because there are no gypsy tints of black skirts.
Right.
But we all know what he means, and it's so beautiful. And that surreal, deep voiced language is when we all say, oh, I wished I'd said that. So then he talks about fishing all night in hungry waters, giving your clothing to warm us. And then as he's saying that, he throws in another straight talk line. Why didn't you drown us like a litter of sick cats? And then he goes right back into that wonderful, deep voice, surreal energy that he says, you gave us your freedom for our mother's fulfillment, and you gave us all the lost honey of a young man's years, steering through those vicious seas. So, and then he ends with, ah, dearest father, dear helmsman, which is rather straight talk. So you see how those energies have been varied, and it's those energies that draw the eye down to the next line, and the next, and the next.
Well, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. And I've loved talking with you. Thank you so much for meeting me.
It's been fun meeting you. I just wish you every success.
Thank you so much.